It's a media deal worth billions of dollars.
The largest merger that's ever been in the media was announced.
The largest merger in history.
The Walt Disney Company announced today that it is buying the Fox family channel.
The proposed merger would plug the new Viacom deeply into every facet of the entertainment industry.
Bigger is considered better.
A huge merger in the struggling computer business.
Together, they'd reach 1 of every 2 homes in America.
Clear Channel Communications, they've gobbled up a lot of radio stations.
But what is democracy?
64 fortunes come out of media.
No one knows who's going to turn out to vote. Most experts expect a low voter turnout.
One of the richest, most powerful media barons.
The consumer will have the choice.
Viewers will be seeing a lot more advertising.
They got theirs, but we're not going to get ours.
We live in a society where we are immersed in media. The average person spends 10, 11, even 12 hours a day with some form of media. Media has become an enormous industry in our society. This sort of boom in media, private media, commercial media, is supposed to lead to a blossoming political culture, a garden place of ideas in which the truth will win out and we'll have a healthy, vibrant political democracy. But instead, what we've seen is exactly the opposite. This boom in media, commercial media at the hands of large corporations and advertisers, has led instead to a shriveling and a dilapidation of our democracy. Well, media ownership is, on one level, seems entirely unimportant because Rupert Murdoch and Sumner Redstone, the owners of our media company, Michael Eisner, the CEO, don't write the movies, they don't play the music, they don't act in their shows. So they seem like just people who count the money in the background. But that's a very misleading and deceptive way to understand how power works in media. The whole logic of a corporate enterprise flows from the top. The point is to make as much money as possible. And if you don't start there, you can never understand how these institutions work and what effect they have. The US media system is basically broken down into 3 tiers of corporations. The first tier are the huge giants. These include Viacom, AOL Time Warner, Disney, News Corporation, Sony, Vivendi. The next tier of companies is one notch down. These are the companies like Comcast or General Electric, the major newspaper giant chains like the New York Times, Knight Ridder, Tribune Company would be in that second tier. This third tier is, though, hundreds of thousands of very small companies that sort of round out the system and do the stuff that the big guys don't find profitable, that fill some local niche. But if you look at the numbers, you say, well, there are hundreds of thousands of media companies, but that's misleading. There's really only a couple dozen that dominate the system. And in all likelihood, that number is going to continue to shrink because as we do this interview, the Federal Communications Commission is in the process of revisiting the few remaining media regulations that prevent these firms from merging newspaper companies with television companies, cable companies with newspaper companies. Once those restrictions are lifted, and there's tremendous pressure by powerful lobbies to do so, we should anticipate a massive wave of consolidation, and those 24 firms will probably shrink down to 18 or 20 within a year or two.
The Federal Communications Commission has released a series of studies as part of its review of media ownership rules. Many observers are anticipating that ownership rules will be relaxed early next year, leading to further consolidation.
One of the striking features, though, that explains media concentration is the rise of what we call media conglomeration, where media companies like AOL Time Warner have put together these far-flung empires with book divisions, with merchandising, with music divisions, with sports teams, in addition to film studios, magazines, and television interests. There are 4 reasons why conglomeration or synergy have made so much sense for media companies and why all of them have really gone that direction in earnest in the past decade. The first is that it allows tremendous advantages in what's called cross-promotion. So if Viacom's Paramount Pictures releases a movie, for example, it can promote that movie incessantly on MTV, its cable channel, or VH1. It can promote it at Blockbuster Video Rental, which it owns. It can promote it on Entertainment Tonight, a television show it produces.
Star Trek Nemesis explodes into theaters December 13th, but you can...
The second factor is cross-production. So if you make something that's a successful movie, you can then turn it into a TV show, into a cable show, into a book, into a soundtrack, and make all the related profits for that. Third, and this is very important, it gives you a lot more leverage over advertisers. So a company like Viacom or Disney can go to a major advertiser like Procter & Gamble or Pepsi and make them $1 billion deal across all their different media to get all this business from them. And they do that, which basically means the smaller companies have no hope of competing. And then fourth and finally is a crucial thing, that media tend to be reliant on blockbusters. That's the nature of these markets. There's a tremendous amount of risk. You spend a lot on a TV show, on a movie, but it might be a complete bomb. You might lose everything. At the same time, one blockbuster can carry an entire film studio for a whole year and cover up all the losses and still make profits. What this means is there's tremendous pressure to get bigger and bigger so you have less risk. So you put that together, it makes a lot of economic sense to build these empires. And as a result, you have almost no independent film studios left, no independent music companies. They simply aren't on equal footing to compete with these massive conglomerates with this notion of synergy. People often ask, well, why is it that these media companies got so huge in the past decade? I mean, why not 50 years ago if it's such a great idea? And the reasons for this are partially deregulation by the government, which made it possible for companies to merge in ways that were illegal before. Partially new technologies that made it more feasible to merge different media sectors together, and partially just the logical pressure of capitalism. I mean, one of the myths of capitalism, and I suspect most people have heard this, that it's based on competition. Actually, it's not based on competition, it's based on smashing competition. And for smart companies, the less direct competition you have, the better. And in capitalism, that means it's very smart to get big as possible, because that means there's less chance that you're going to face competition coming after you. One of the myths of our media system is that it's sort of this natural private system that was born by heroic entrepreneurs, and the government's job is only to come in and meddle with it and interfere with the entrepreneurs in the private sector. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, our media system is the direct result of government policies that created it. The Federal Communications Commission was established in 1934, and on paper, its function is to represent the public's interests with regard to the allocation of licenses to the broadcasters. So the deal is, in theory, that we're giving the people of this country are giving monopoly licenses to private commercial companies to use very scarce, valuable channels in each community. And in exchange, these companies should do something they wouldn't do if they were simply private concerns out to maximize profit. They should do something in the public interest. And it's the FCC's job to see that they do that. Now that's what we're taught in Mrs. McGillicuddy's civics class is what it's supposed to do. Nothing could be further from the truth. The way it has evolved over time is the FCC has proven to be almost entirely powerless to force any sort of serious public interest requirements on commercial media. And in fact, the corruption of the process would be difficult to exaggerate. One way to think about how media policy making is done in the United States is to consider the Oscar-winning film from 1974, The Godfather Part 2. Early in that film, there's a scene where Hyman Roth and Michael Corleone are sitting on top of a rooftop at a Havana hotel with a bunch of American gangsters. And they're carving up a cake that has an outline of Cuba on it. They all agree it's their cake and no one else should get a piece of it. And they're fighting over who gets the largest piece. Well, that's how media policy making is done in the United States.
What I'm saying is that we have now what we have always needed, real partnership with the government.
The Telecommunication Act of 1996 is arguably one of the 3 or 4 most important laws of the last 50 years.
Good evening and welcome to The Revolution. We begin tonight with all of the changes about to take place in the life of anyone who uses a phone or a television or a computer.
It began today when President Clinton signed the bill that will revolutionize the industry. There are big changes coming in the way that we'll get television, telephone, and computer services.
This was Congress's sort of charter for how it should see communication develop in the digital age, with the internet, with the changes in radio and television, that this was laying out the fundamental values that should guide the FCC for the next 2 or 3 generations to the information age. A law of this magnitude, you would hope, would be the subject of political debate, of candidates discussing it, public involvement, of extensive press coverage, since the values it would embody would be so crucial to the future of our nation. The promise of the law when it was passed, the